waaqa hin aarre, waaqa hin muufanne, waaqa hunduma jaalatu, waaqa waan hunduma uume, ol gubbaarraa uumaa jiru hundumaa, lafa jalarraa uumaa jiru hundumaa, hundumtuu siin ta'e, siin malee kan biraatiin hin taane, harki biraa keessa hin jiru. Kana hunduma waan nu gooteef yaa Waaqa galanni si haa ga'u. Waaqni keenya galanni si haa ga'u. Yaa Waaqa si kadhannaa Waaqa keenya har'a Oromoo bakkuma bakka biyyaa walitti funaantee biyya alagaa kana keessatti hoggaa waaqeffannu yaa Waaqa hunda nu kennite asitti akka argamnu kan nu gooteef galanni si haa ga'u. Yaa Waaqa si galateeffannaa kan asitti hoggaa walitti qabamnu warri imaltuu dheeraa kutee biyya kana dhufe baga nagaan biyya kanatti waldaa kanarratti argamuudhaaf Waaqni isaan dandeesse. Baga Waaqni isaan qarqaara. Asitti hoggaa walitti qabamnu Waaqni walitti qabama keenya kana marii keenya kana marii nagaan waa godhu. Afaan keenya afaan nagaan waa godhu. Walitti dhuunfaatiin walitti hin jala nu haa baatu. Hamtuun mirgaan dhufe bitaatti nurraa qabu. Hamtuu bitaan dhufe mirgatti nu haa qabu. Waaqni inni qajeeladha. Karaa dhugaa inni nu haa qajeelchu. Isa harka jirra harka isaarraa nu buusin nu qabatee yaa Waaqa waan hundumaa gorsa keetiin deemna. Gorsa kee nu milkeessi. Warra jiran hundumaa afaan tokko taasisi. Warra asitti argaman duwwaa domtee Oromoo hundumaa afaan tokko taasisi. Oromoo hundumaa tokkicha godhi. Oromoo tokkoomsi. Yaa Waaqa ummata keenya kan mirga ofiitiin lolan biyya mirgi hin jirre keessa jiraatanii akkanatti illee walitti qabamuu kan hin dandeenye. Yaa Waaqa balaa afaan cufaa biyya sanii jalaa nu baasi. Ummata keenya hundumaa sanirraa isaan bilisoomsi. Ummanni keenya karaa itti fakkaateen karaa dhugaa ta'een kan lolu hundumaafuu ati karaa qajeelchi sii karaan sii malee karaa dhugumaarra deemuun hin danda'amu. Ati karaa itti agarsiisi. Ummanni keenya erga dhalate abbaarraa ilmatti sanyiirraa sanyiitti eeguu qabna. Eeguu bilisummaa qabna. Yaa Waaqa ati itti dabalamtu malee humni namaa gatiin qabu kophaa isaa. Kanaaf yaa Waaqa ati itti dabalamiiti bilisummaa keenya nu karoorte. Bilisa nu baasi. Ummata keenya tokko taasise. Tokkichummaa keenya nu dhugoomsi. Kana jedhee si kadhadhaa hamma calqabnee fintutti yaa Waaqa ati nu biraanatiin nu keessatti jiraannu sii kan nu oofu qajeelchaa keenya nu qajeelchi. Si kadhannaa bara baraan nu biraanatiin hamman jedhaa kana irraa hambisee waan inni itti dabatu kan garaa keenyaa beekaa kan afaaniin dubbachuu dadhabne inni itti nu haa dabalu hamman jedhaa ulfaataa.
Waaqayyo abbaatti kan ilmaatti karaa fuulduruttis waaqayyo tokko. Ameen. Waaqayyoon guddaa galateeffannaa guyyaa har'a kana akkasitti walitti qabamuu keenyatti iddoo kanatti magaalaa tamsii jechuun barbaada. Manga mana guddaa sababiin isaa amantuu kan naawwannee afur taanee amantii gara garaa kan geggeessu beeknaa taanee jiruutti saba tokko ta'uu keenya argisiisa. Oromoo amantii gara garaa qabaatu malee hundi keenya saba tokko akka taane isa inni kun hin mirkaneessu. Biyya keessatti akkuma gaggeeffamu qabus kanuma. Egaa wanti guddaan nurra jiru nurra kan jiru sabni keenya hin dammaqin kan jiru baay'ee jireenya kan walbanna walitti dabarsuu qabna. Waa'ee mirga namummaa Oromoo waa'ee eenyummaa Oromoo tokko tokkotti dabarsuu qabna. Ani amantii kiristaanaa lallaba. Nam tokkee barbaadee arganna. Bakkee keessa nam tokkee barbaadee finnee galchina. Amantiidha. amantii Oromummaan akka kanatti adeemuu yoo baate booda gaafa tokko yoo waaqayyoon gargaaree mirkaneeffachuu filachuu hin dhufne akkamitti akka filannu eenyu maal akkamitti jedhu beekuu hin danda'amu. Kanaaf hundina akkasitti dubbiin Oromummaa kun namaa namatti tokkoon maatii keenyatti sanyii keenyatti dabarsuu qabna jedhee gorsuudhaaf barbaada. Waaqayyo waa eebbisu, waaqayyo waa eegu, waaqayyo ifatti waa baasu, waaqayyo dukkana nu waa fageessu, waaqayyo kufuudhaaf kufaata nu waa buqqisu, waaqayyo warra jaalalaan waa godhu, waaqayyo warra nagaan waa godhu, waaqayyo nu waa eebbisu, waaqayyo nu wajjin hidhatu, warra garaa tokko, warra yaada tokko, warra tokko yaadee tokko fi ambaasu waa godhu. Maqaa Gooftaa Yesuus Kiristoos ilma Waaqayyootiin. Ameen.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Kanatan Quran. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Akkuma olaa'u waajjiraan kun jedhanii asirratti eebbifuudhaaf dhufnee yeroo eebbisnu jalqabaa rabbii waan hojjennu hunduma keessatti beekumsa kaa'ee wanti beekumsa irratti hirkatee guddinni ilma namaa jireenyi ilma namaa hundinuu beekumsa irra kaa'ame akkuma kana amma asitti beekumsa isaanii waan beeku riisarchii hojjete hundumaa fidee walitti himee uummatatti himee guddina saba keenyaa guddina biyya addunyaatiif waan ta'u hundumaa walitti qabee waan irraa barate barsiisuudhaaf itti argame. Kanaaf wanti kuni hiikara haba'uu fi rabbii ammallee waan baranii kan hojiirra oolchinu nama taasisu biyya keenyas beekumsa kanaan kan guddifannu addunyaanillee akkuma kana kanatti guddatu rabbii taasisu walgahii keenya har'aa kana walgahii milkaa'aa walgahii gaarii walgahii nagaa rabbii taasisu waan bade hundumaa rabbii qajeelchu biyya keenya hiriyyummaa bilisummaa keenyallee rabbii nuuf kennu. Egaa badii miidhama nurra ga'e kana rabbi nurraa kaatu birahmatu isaati nurraa hiriira subhaana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salaamun alal mursaliin walhamdulillahi rabbil aalamiin.
Maqaa Abbaa kan Ilmaa kan Hafuura Qulqulluu sadan Waaqa tuqfameen duraan dursee yaa Waaqayyo Abbaa keenyaa bakka jirurraa Oromoo tokko taasistee karaa Oromoo State Associationii waamicha nu darbeen akkanaan akka walitti dhufnu kan nu goote galanni siifa ta'u waan walitti dhufneef waliin haasofnee waliin mari'annee jecha tokko waliin dabarsinee laphee tokko wal jaallannee akka deemnu yaa Waaqayyo tokkummaa kee nurra oolchi bulchi. Jara waan gaarii nu yaadan hundumaa nutti qabe yaa Waaqayyo jara hamaa nurratti yaadan uummata kee kanarratti hamaa yaadan nurraa achi qabe gaachana nu ta'e uummata itti yaallatte uummata itti eebbiste akka coqorsaa kallatee kan baay'ate yaa Waaqayyo karaan irra deemaa jiru karaa bilisummaa atittiin hundeen karaa wal kabajuu atittiin hundeen karaa mirgati kenniteefi yaa Waaqayyo lafa yaade akka inni ga'u gidduutti akka saba Israa'el gaafa Misrii ba'utti burjaaja'ee karaa irratti hafee kun ta'e tokko ta'ee tokkummaa isaa cimsatee kallattii keewwateen deebii lafa yaade akka ta'u yaa Waaqayyo uummata keenya gargaara. Yoo badii balleessine yoo si yakkinillee atumti dhiifama tokkummaa keetti nu godhe malee dabarsi jaalalaatti nu kenni. Jaalala kee uummata rakkoo keessa jiru, hidhaa keessa jiru, ajjechaa keessa jiru mulaan yaa Waaqayyo. Jara lubbuu isaanii uummata isaaniitiif kennuudhaaf ofitti murteeffatanii biyya isaanii uummata isaanii eegaa jiran irree isaanii nu cimsi. Ala waraanaa gaachana ta'eef injifannoof ta'eef uummata keenya hayyoota keenya jara akkana yeroo isaanii kennanii walitti dhufanii mari'atan waan jarri mari'atan kana kan biyyaaf ta'u kan uummataaf ta'u kan addunyaa kanaaf ta'u nu taasisi yaa Waaqayyo nu gargaara. Si qabnaa si malee waan qabnu yaa Waaqayyo jennee bulla yaa Waaqayyo ati nu gatin yaa Waaqayyo ati nu dhiisin rakkoon keenya yoo baay'atellee lafa yaadne suma qabannee hin maleefna yaa Waaqayyo maa rakkoon dhufeen jennu rakkoo keenya irra immoo ittiin humna ceeru nu kenni nu ceesisi yaa Waaqayyo hidhamtoota keenya nu hiiksisi jara lubbuun isaanii wareegame mootummaa kee nu dhaalfisi, daa'imman keenya nu guddisi, hayyoonni keenya isa eebbisan yaa Waaqayyo nurra bulchi. Milkoofnee akka walitti dhufnee jalqabne, milkoofnee akka fixnu, waan fixne immoo hojiirra oolchinee biyya keenyaaf, uummata keenyaaf akka taanu yaa Waaqayyo nu gargaarii galanni siif haa ta'u.
Amen.
Make it up as what we do right now. Because we have
Thank you, Mr. President. I will continue. Dear OSA members and attendees, welcome to OSA's 36th annual conference. The last time we met face-to-face was in 2018 at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. Some of us met each other at our first annual conference at Colonial University in 2019. In Virginia, we met our people who came and greeted us from every region of Oromo, and we witnessed the love they have for OSA. From Jimma, Adoolessa, from we're joined by Ijoollee Baabura, and then by Ijoollee Waliso. From Wallagga, Ijoollee Tulu, Ijoollee Bakkaree Gulana, Ijoollee Abishee Garba, joined Ijoollee Alamuti Keessa Inambo. From Harar, Ijoollee Afran Kallo, and from Bade, Ijoollee Wakubutu joined Ijoollee Srak Commando. From Sarare, Ijoollee Tadese Kulu, and from Wallo, Ijoollee Muhammad Ali, and Amade Bashir. From Morana, Ijoollee Abadi Ban Japasaguyo, and joined Bushi Kenya, and then joined Nure Badasu, Ijoollee Nure Badasu. All from there to Finne, and for the first time met OSA at Oromo at Lafto, located a few kilometers away from Garut. Thank you, Oromo, for the love you have for OSA and for one another. God willing, inshallah, we will meet again. But by going to Finne, we tested the water to possibly chart our future, the future of OSA. Today, that future is bleak. The water we tested got deeper and deeper, drowning tens of thousands of Oromo people, our people. When we come together today, after 3 or 4 years of separation, we do not only celebrate our reunion, but also get a moment of reflection to remember our combatants back home who have been going through excruciatingly most painful life in the history of the Oromo people. We keep remembering the dead and the alive in our prayers. God willing, inshallah, thou shalt pass. For all OSA scholars, thanks for your continued dedication to Oromo studies and for your unrelenting efforts to move OSA forward with your knowledge and put our people and Oromia on the map of scholarship globally. For our, I have only 1 minute. For OSA scholars back home, thank you for your participation and continued engagement in the most difficult circumstances. We hope the time to reunite will come soon for us to work as one body and for community of Oromo scholars. I thank everybody for telling me to stop. I thank everybody who is here, for the scholars, for some members. We are here because of you. You made us stronger than ever by every day. Particularly, I thank the conference organizing committee for making this conference a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, so our next and first panel is on theoretical approaches to self-determination. We have 4 presenters. Those of you who are here, Dr. Yarek Tefasa and Dr. Mayo Group, you can go up on the stage. And we have 2 panelists joining from Zoom. The first one is
Dr. Asaba Ragasa. He's currently a senior research and teaching fellow at University of Zurich, Switzerland. Did PhD at the University of Bayern, Germany in the field of development studies. Served as Associate Professor of Development Studies in Villa University until 2020. And his research interests areas including federalism, peace and conflict studies, state-society relations, indigenous people's rights, and extractive industries. He also published over 20 articles in peer-reviewed journals and book chapters, among which two recent publications were Urban Development and Making Progress, co-authored with Special Manner. He also authored Frontiers of Extraction, Contestation, Dispossession, Exclusion, and Local Resistance Against Mineral, Lagadambi. And he's currently serving as OSA President-elect, and he will be President after this conference. The title of his presentation is Self-Determination as a Decolonial Approach. Dr. Asaba, if you can hear me, you will be next. And then I'll introduce the remaining panelists. Those of you who are here, if you can come up to the figure.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Can you hear me, please? Would you give me a confirmation?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you all for attending. I'm here today because of the visa application problem. I couldn't make it in person. It would have been really great opportunity to meet you in person in DC. But hopefully I will make it next round, next year. So as Guma already introduced, I'm giving this very brief presentation. I will try to make it in 15 minutes as indicated, self-determination as a decolonial approach. This is the fundamental core theme of the conference, as you also saw in the program. It is about the self-determination, and I will be making up, framing my presentation within the colonial and decolonial approach in the global context, and linking that into the Ethiopian particular historical phenomena. As you all know, Ethiopia as a colonial state had its own similarities with colonial systems across the world. And then I will connect that into the Oromo struggles for self-determination. My presentation will follow up this one. As I mentioned, as the entry point, I want to make two fundamental points. The first one is, when we talk about self-determination, although it is in most cases framed from the political and the legal frameworks, but I want to emphasize that it is a response to colonial systems, different dimensions of colonial systems, with its characteristics of political, epistemic, cultural, socio-economic dominations, and also the asymmetrical power relations that colonial system produces. So when we talk about self-determination, it is not only a democratic exercise, but it is a response to such histories of domination and marginalization. So in order to understand the quest for self-determination of different nations and nationalities, different groups, a decolonial approach is very important, because this approach unsettles or deconstructs the hegemonic narrative of the discourses on which colonial systems are built, and on which they will also try to legitimize their institutions. For example, colonialism or state building in general has been built through this modernizing or modernist civilizing missions. So this decolonial approach helps us to deconstruct this narrative. That is why I use the decolonial approach. I mentioned about the nexus between colonialism and self-determination. That is how we need to understand, because different international organizations, human rights associations, and so on, try to kind of superficially touch about self-determination only from a democratic point of view, about human rights point of view, although it is about human rights and democratization, but it should go deep into the history about colonialism, about state building, about state formation, and so on, globally, and then we also get that into the Ethiopian context. So when we talk about colonialism, whether it is internal colonialism or external imposed colonial systems, then this colonialism in general strips people of their rights, their dignities, their knowledge. It expropriates their resources. People will be in general reduced to subhumans. Their dignity will be reduced. They begin to serve as laborers. They can't use their own affairs by themselves. So that is one aspect of colonialism. But it is also beyond that. As we know, for example, in Ethiopia, through different state institutions across the successive regimes, selective historical narratives have been installed. And this is true across the colonial histories in the world also. Selective historical narratives means the history of the conquerors, the history of the colonial powers will be dominant. That will be represented either through symbolic representations or through material discourses. And that helps the dominant groups or the colonial powers to produce regimes of truth. By regimes of truth, I mean it makes people to be eligible to be governed by those rulers. And we can associate this into our own context, how the regimes of truth are being developed, and then make people to be submissive, or try to make people submissive to successive regimes in Ethiopia. And the current, for example, the narrative of prosperity in Ethiopia under the Abiy regime could also be one regime of truth, which is in the process of being built to make people legible for that narrative. And on the contrary, such dominant narrative also silence counter histories. The history of the subject, the colonial subject, the history of those who were conquered becomes either marginal in the history books or silenced generally or erased. It is not about the history that I'm talking, but their rights, their theories will be silenced, erased. And then their entitlement to their land, for example, will also be given a different meaning, and the history of the dominant will be magnified. So when we talk about the self-determination, then it is against such historical phenomena of colonization, against this historical periods of domination, marginalization, expropriation of resources that beginning from around 18th century, one would even go beyond that, but from 18th century onwards, different movements in different parts of the world started. One might start with American War of Independence, the French Revolution, the First and the Second World War periods brought this idea of self-determination as a mobilizing force for subaltern voices, or for those who were colonized, or for those who were dominated, so that their forms of knowledge, their institutions, their right to whatsoever we talk about, human rights, democratic rights, and the others would be ensured through self-determination. So this is from the political perspective, but self-determination is also not only political. It also is discursive in a way, because when we talk about colonization, as I mentioned, it is not only political imposition of ruling, but it is also discursively instituted. different discourses make people to be eligible for governance, and then self-determination dismantles this narrative. And the second aspect of the decolonial turning, when we see self-determination through the decolonial idea, it is also an emancipatory process, because when people gain the political right to self-determination, and when they also work hand in hand with the discursive aspect, when they dismantle those dominant narratives, then it leads to the emancipation of the mind, the knowledge, the way knowledge production is taking place, emancipation of the political system of domination, emancipation of the exploitation, or they will be emancipated from all sorts of burdens of colonialism in general. So that is why we just bring this definition, although self-determination might have different dimensions, but generally it is a right of a collectivity to determine its future, be it political, economic, cultural, or a combination of these. I mean, when we talk about self-determination, it is a collective who determines about its future in terms of political, cultural, economic, and other aspects of life. Whether to form a political statehood, or to have its own political institution within where it lives. And it has different aspects of implementation, either through statehood or through multinational federalism or through democratization within existing state structure. This is the general aspect of self-determination in general. But self-determination is not only also a political aspect, but it had, particularly when we talk about the decolonizing aspects of it, it has policy implications or policy dimensions. And I brought only about 6 different areas in which people who struggle for self-determination could focus in order to achieve the right to self-determination, but within this fundamental notion of decolonization. The first one is education. Education is either a technology of emancipation or, in another way, a technology of colonization and subjugation. The way curriculum is designed, the way education is given, the way people, the way people learn, this all make decolonizing the curriculum, for example, is one area in which one can engage. Economies, as I mentioned, ensuring people's resource sovereignty, under what circumstance, in what way could be different, the discussion could be there, but decolonizing the economy and its extractivist institutions could be another area. The political is, I already mentioned, the political sovereignty or autonomy. And the issue of culture could also be, because I mentioned it is liberation, emancipation, and when people are culturally emancipated, then their identity will also be emancipated. The other aspect in which authoritarian states or colonial states in general also maintain their exercise their authority over people is through different material special symbolic representations like status, and so on. So reversing and dismantling these symbolic representations could also be another area. But very fundamentally is a knowledge area of knowledge production. Decolonizing knowledge production system is another area in which one would contribute through decolonizing methodology, the way we do research, which also has actually been doing for the last 40 years. So let me bring you to Ethiopian context. I don't want to give much explanation about the Ethiopian context. You know the way the state was formed and what it has been doing against different nations and nationalities. And in the 1960s, that produced, that oppressive system, that marginalization, exploitation, dispossession of people and the resources produced the struggle for self-determination, which I would also call a decolonization of the empire itself. The 1960s different student movements and then where different Oromo intellectuals and the students also contributed, it delegitimized the Ethiopian state. For example, with those places like of the Ibsen Thomas poem where he said, "Who is an Ethiopian?" That kind of uncertainty disrupted that hegemonic narrative about Ethiopia. The issue of land between the Chinas and then the peace enterprises in different parts of the country, and in Oromia particularly also, the Major Ulama Association and then the education revolution there, and particularly the birth of the OLF and the fundamental tenets of self-determination, which many young generations have actually took over that commitment. And then through different processes, I mean, I don't want to go to each and every point, but after the post-1991 multinational federal arrangement in which the OLF also contributed during the transition period, then gradually the birth of the new generation, which is also a decolonizing the education system, which I mentioned before. The older generation was born through the decolonization of the education system because children who start to learn in their vernacular language start to develop the identity, and that led to this recent movement and protest which we all know. And some few examples could be given in my context. The master plan. The protest against the master plan, and for example, the protest against Lagodanbi gold mining, I would say these were questions for resource sovereignty. And in general, these were counter movements against the hegemonic state building project in Ethiopia. And I want to kind of conclude because of the time that I want to make 2 points. The first one is the struggle for self-determination in general, globally and even in our context, faces different resistance because it threatens the economic and political interests of dominant groups. That is why we currently face different challenges and resistance from the state, from other actors, even including international organizations and international actors, because the interest will be threatened when people get their rights. And more importantly, what we need to know is in the first 2018, there is a return to this imperial regime in Ethiopia, and that is a major threat to the struggle to self-determination and to some achievements that the Ethiopian Jews brought during those movements. And therefore, what I want to mention is we need to not only focus on we need to not only focus on the political dimension, but also on a multi-dimensional aspect of self-determination, including this narrative, discussive approach, and so on. And any effort against this that enhances consolidation of the Ethiopian state is against the struggle for self-determination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asaba. I really appreciate your time. Next, I'm going to introduce Madeline Brass. I had the privilege last year on Madeline's roundtable, which was on institutionalizing, anti-colonizing, developing the Oromo archive. So I'm going to introduce Madeline again. And she is an early stage researcher completing her PhD with the MOVE's European Joint Doctorate, dually enrolled at the University of Kent and the Free University in Berlin. In her current research, she works primarily with Oromo women, understanding the Oromo struggle at the intersection of Black studies and critical indigenous studies. She lived in Western Oromia from 2014 to 2017. And the title of her presentation is Self-Determination as Relation Alternative Approaches for Free Oromia. Madeline, the floor is yours.
So thank you for that warm introduction. My name is Madeline Bass. It's a pleasure to be with you all here digitally, even if I'm not physically there, and I really echo Ogo and hope to be with you all in person someday. In today's presentation, titled Self-Determination as Relation, Alternative Approaches for a Free Oromia, I will think through notions of indigeneity and relationality, in order to understand ways of theorizing Oromo self-determination that move away from imperial violence. In this vein, I will begin by glossing over the idea of settler colonialism as a certain type of colonialism and the conditions this places on freedom and self-determination. I will then move into some critical indigenous theory to sketch out ways of understanding how indigenous relations may inform other approaches to self-determination. So I'm happy to be on a panel with Asebe also, because I think some of our ideas are kind of in conversation here, but I think this is where I take a bit of a turn. So I would say Ethiopia and settler colonialism is different than internal or external types of colonization, because the process of settlement led to the creation of a settler colonial nation state, and the colonizers never left. In order to uphold their settlement, these forces used complex projects of bordering and ordering, forced assimilation, bureaucracy, and open violence. Some of the traits and some scholarship around settler colonialism and its nuances are listed on the slide here, but perhaps the easiest example to identify of another settler colony is the United States or Canada. Indigenous peoples were colonized and remained captured by a violent genocidal state that refuses full respect for their existence. I talked to you all in Washington, D.C., just as the Ethiopian state hosts its events in Addis Ababa, shadowing the living legacies of Nfinneh. Settlement and the legitimacy of the settler state put immediate pressure on forms of sovereignty and potential self-determinations that exceed the state. I think this relationship is summed up well here by Mohawk scholar Audra Simpson, as she says, the state seeks to destroy what is not. It does so with a death drive to eliminate, contain, hide, and in other ways disappear what challenges its legitimacy, indigenous political orders. And here's the rub. Indigenous political orders are quite simply first, are prior to the project of founding, of settling, and as such continue to point in their persistence and vigor to the failure of the settler project to eliminate them. Even as they are subjects of dispossession, of removal, their qualities serve as an alternative forms of legitimacy and sovereignties to that of the settler state. So Simpson is writing here from another settler colony. I'm struck by the way this resonates with the Ethiopian experience. The borders and bordering of the Horn of Africa are a clear example of the legacy of settlement, one I always return back to. What kind of people or nation can truly be separated by a wall and a straight line? This map tells a story of imperial and settler colonial state-making. The sovereignty that it normalizes does not make sense or make justice for indigenous peoples. Rather than thinking of the way people actually relate to each other and the land, the language is shifted into ownership, citizenship, paperwork, and declarations of state property. I use this larger regional example to demonstrate that the sovereignty or self-determination prescribed and demanded by such nation states is one that is rooted in violence and the colonial impetus to collect and trap potential resources. As indigenous activists in what is now known as Mexico say, we didn't cross the border crossed us. This legal establishment created a socio-political culture that normalizes the nation state. Thinking with abolitionists and anti-colonial scholars, however, I believe that theorizing self-determination with the assumption that the nation-state form is correct, appropriate, or inevitable is to begin by foreclosing a world of opportunity. The Oromo and other indigenous peoples model a way of living and relating that upends and refutes the colonial world order. Indigenous political orders, as referenced by Simpson, describe indigeneity as a way of understanding people beyond the static legal definitions of the concept. Indigenous conveys a relationship. It is not a question of rights, but of responsibilities, as stated by scholars like Norton Robinson. To quote Tuck and Rowe, Indigenous understandings of land predate and have co-developed alongside and in spite of settler construction of property. To clarify these meanings of indigeneity and to move this conversation back towards self-determination, I want to use the Peoplehood Model. So this model was proposed by Holm, Pearson, and Travis as a way of theoretically linking Indigenous experiences across different regions. The model shows that Indigenous peoples are a part of, rather than an imposition of the environment. More specific to the conversation of self-determination, the Peoplehood Model is meant to help reconsider what a legitimate political form looks like beyond the narrow hierarchical state forms that have come to dominate. There are four concepts in the model, defined individually but deeply interconnected, as the graphic shows: language, sacred history, ceremonial cycle, and place or territory. They're kind of deceptively simple because these things also include language. For example, it's not just the expression of Oromo, it's references and nuances, the significance of oral histories in telling the Oromo story, the melodies and call and response forms of songs, stretching across Oromo cultural communities and dialects, even for those Oromo people who've been denied access to their language. This links naturally to sacred history, as we see how kinship structures are, for example, both labeled and lived, how something like Oromuma is so steeped in historical experiences. Ceremonial cycles are temporal, as we can think of data timekeeping, but they're also the connection between the how, the why, and when certain ceremonies take place, as with Arecha, a symbol of Thanksgiving, and what giving thanks to Oromo land looks like in that season. Place and territory, Oromia, the last piece of the puzzle, means both the physical space, but also Oromia as a sacred context and place where cultural memories and the songs of ancestors live. This distinction of place as a context and a site of memory is really key because it recognizes the relationships to land held by those Oromo who are displaced and exiled. This is something that's been described in some way by Kwekumsa as transnational indigeneity. Using peoplehood as a way to understand or make sense of sovereignty helps to form a starting point for the furtherance and expansion of Oromo self-determination. Rather than definitions that rely on violent colonial constructs like borders, peoplehood legitimizes the parts of a nation and people that are unconquered and unconquerable. Even if parts of Oromia, Oromuma, and the Oromo people are under attack, their sovereignty remains intact through the vitality and interconnections of the peoplehood. To make this abstraction more directly linked to Oromo epistemologies, we may look at the relationship between Ayana, Uma, and Safu, as described by Geometry Magersa and other scholars. These three notions are not easily condensed or glossed over, and I would not want to disrespect all of the rich scholarship around them by attempting it. But in a simplistic way, repeating the language used by Geometry Magersa in his 2005 article, you can see Ayana as a spirit existing before and after that which it causes to come into existence, both knowledge and the knowledge of that knowledge. Uma is the physical world, both living things and the divine beings contained within it. And Safu is the ethical basis of action and how these lives can be lived together. These three concepts express the relationships between materiality, humanity, history, future, and the intangible. Peoplehood is built around relationality, just as in the Oromo epistemology, the created universe is held together by these concepts and their connections. No item can be divorced from its spirit and the role it plays in the larger conditions of ethical rightness, wrongness, and cohesion. When relationships are disrupted, self-determination is also under attack. Expressed in the Peoplehood Model, for example, the Oromo language evokes ceremonial cycles and meanings that cannot be separated from the Oromo homelands, even if settlement has sought to erase these names and traditions. The challenge comes then in both clarifying these meanings and translating these existing sovereignties into descriptions that may be intelligible to larger international bodies and legal frameworks. And I think it's interesting that both Owaseva and I use this idea of intelligibility and trying to make these things translate or become clear in a framework that kind of fundamentally doesn't understand them or doesn't want to move them for them. To take a kind of final practical turn toward the tensions between self-determination as it's under attack and the resilient sovereignty of the Oromo peoplehood, I want to use a visual example. I hope this is clear. I kind of blew up the contrast a bit so you can see some of the shadowy things. But a few things stick out or come to mind here. The Heineken building, you can see on the left side, its bright red star. The African Union Tower is visible in the distance and peering overhead. There's a river running through the bottom corner with trash and other muck piled up on the shores. And there are houses whose rooftops peek up in between the lush green trees, in between opposing ends of extreme wealth and power and everyday lives on the margins. As an example of Oromo peoplehood under attack by the force of the settler colonial state, this image paints a somewhat grim picture. So Heineken's rapid rise and encroachment into local economies and foodways strengthens capitalism in the global north and the commodification of cultural practices. The pollution and trash comes from a city that doesn't have the infrastructure to support its citizens, threatening both the land it crosses and the networks and waterways it links to. The African Union is a symbol of the international recognition of nation-state sovereignty and settlement over Oromo indigenous sovereignty, as has been described by the In contrast, as a hopeful future, or in Oromia where self-determination and peoplehood are strengthened, we still see something special on these water shores. The trees have found the vitality remaining in this water, its source of life, and they have responded despite the disruptions of pollution. This kind of resistance has been called eco-sovereignty, the inherent self-determination of land that is visible when you understand its relationality. The houses tucked along this river and the people who make their lives here have a knowledge of this land and water that supersedes the vision available to those elites on the top floor of the Heineken building who peer out and see only potential profit. I also point this out to show that peoplehood as a complex web of relations does not disappear even in the face of such overwhelming state practice. So given this, how does self-determination grow and become real and tangible? I would ask, rather than thinking that sovereignty and self-determination can only occur using pathways created by states and bodies that value settlement and remain steeped in the imperial, what else exists? Self-determination that fails to consider the foundational value of peoplehood does not do justice to the intricacies of Oromo Ayana, Uma, and Saku. Return to an Oromo proverb, which is translated and has been discussed by Kuekumsa. The reeds are burned in the valley, the seeding basket heaps in the kitchen. Self-determination found with the reeds and the basket, the past and present versions of something interwoven within a larger set of relations, or self-determination of fire, asserting a demand to exist over all others. Without getting too lost in these metaphors, I'd say sovereignty and self-determination through relation begin when we see the relationships to land and to each other beyond the language of ownership and possession. In this sense, a sovereign or self-determined state is not one that you have ownership over, an Oromia who is free simply because the hierarchy has been flipped and Oromo people are in leadership positions. Sovereignty is the freedom to live, love, feed your community, protect your youth and elders. Freedom in this sense requires healing, as Kuekumsa says. Healing, I mean creating a home of justice and liberation. This is a freedom that disrupts and refuses hierarchy, and what's more important, restores the critical relationality, care, and solidarity that are working to resist the existing structures of injustice and unfreedom. If the first priority in the definition of self-determination is relationships, strengthening pieces of peoplehood and the people around, we may begin in a more practical sense to find a form of self-determination that moves towards a freedom that makes us, to British Offside Hartman, as free as we actually want to be.
And you have water in there. Thank you, Madeline, for that. I appreciate my panelists on their kindness. So next, so we return to the Zoom presentations. We have two panelists that are here in the room. I'm going to introduce Dr. Anil Peru. He is a long-standing member of OSA, former lecturer at Addis Ababa University Department of Philosophy, and he studied philosophy at AAU, bachelor's, and at Leipzig University, MA and PhD in Germany with specialization in political and moral philosophy. He also has an MBA from City University of Seattle. The title of his presentation is Citizenship versus Identity in the Current Political Discourse.
Hello, everybody. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor and for me to present today to you about citizenship and identity politics. I say citizenship versus identity politics because in Ethiopia most of the time, issues are presented as black and white, as binary or opposite issues. So that is what I wanted to try to reflect on the topic. Why I should present on this issue is because there is a permanent political discourse within Ethiopian politics in categorizing two kinds of movements as if there are two diametrically opposite exclusive to one another. So they categorize. So in that case, categorization goes like this. Citizenship politics is more political, rational, universal, impartial, has nothing to do with identity. And identity politics is always primordial, something new, something that is related to nature, than to human beings. So something that is emotionally charged and very particularistic. That is how they characterize these two different approaches. So my question is whether such kind of categorization could be theoretically helpful, theoretically tenable, and practically helpful in resolving all of the time. What I would like to examine whether this categorization could be falsified or could be affirmed. I would like to approach the issue from two perspectives. One is from practical perspective, that is from history, and the other is from theoretical perspective. And both in theory and practice, there have never been a single conception of citizenship. There have been always different conceptions, different understanding of what citizenship is, both in history and theory. We know for sure liberals, social democrats, Republicans, for example, they do have different conceptions of citizenship. For liberals, it is the autonomy of the individual, what's important, the liberty of the individual, what's important, to be recognized as citizens. For social democrats, the welfare. Welfare, that means equal distribution of resource, is what guarantees citizenship. For Republicans, patriotism, common and collective sense of identity is very important. So, in terms of theory as well, we can enumerate a number of other doctrines. they do have different conceptions of citizenship. But let me switch to the practical one is membership in any case, in all these liberal, social democrat, or republicans, it means inclusiveness. It means membership. Despite their difference, they do have such similarity. Common membership to a political community is what they call citizenship. The best example for this, I have to come to the historical incidents. For the first time in human history, the concept citizenship has been used by the Greeks. I mean, as far as the world literature is concerned, the Greek city-states, you know, before the state we know today is formed. That means before the birth of Jesus Christ in 500 BC. They used to have city-states. In these city-states, they consider citizenship as membership to free male inhabitants of a city. But mind you, when we say free male, it shows already exclusivity. That means there are people who are not free. These are the slaves, the conquered people, and war captives were not free people. And it says also male. Male excludes the female already. So that means even that time, the adjective free, the adjective male immediately like a citizen is therefore one who is not a slave or a female. He appreciates that in the citizen appreciates the value of citizenship from a negative perspective. That means, what is citizenship? Citizenship is a right that gives you not a right to be not a slave or not a woman. So that means we explain the virtue of citizenship in reference to what is not, rather than to what it is. So we are not enumerating the right of citizens, but we are explaining the privilege of the citizens in reference to slavery and female or gender inequality. So the second form of citizenship understanding was during the Roman Empire. During the Roman Empire, as you know, there was stratifications of more stratification, diversification of social classes. Because of that, citizenship was not considered even as a political membership. It was considered as a kinship relation because citizens were inhabitants of the Rome city, Not all inhabitants in that case as well. Only the noble class, the nobility, and the class of people who belong to the noble class and residing in the Roman Empire, in the Rome city, not in the Roman Empire as such. So that means, if you remember, this European way of naming a family, describe the three parts of a name was originated during the Roman Empire. And that is to indicate those who are born in such a privilege, in such a kinship relationship, then they were privileged. So in order to exclude others, the Firaa'ol, it was called Firaa'ol, or a three-part name, was adopted. That means it was not allowed for everybody to adopt some kind of three-part name. So in that case, again, it is an exclusion. Citizenship is an exclusion. It is based on exclusion, based on your identity in that case. It has never been universal. It has never been a privilege to everyone. So the brand name Nomina was an exclusive mark of Roman citizenship in order to protect and preserve the purity of that citizenship. This tradition has later descended to emerging feudal systems to the point the concept of citizenship is identified only with the aristocratic class, reducing all others to mere subjects. So as we know, in the Dark Age or the feudal system, in fact, there was no, the concept, the very concept of citizenship has been eradicated altogether. Because with the emergence of absolute monarchy, the very concept was eradicated since the purpose of states and politics became nothing but fulfill the will of God in and through the emperor. What I wanted to say here in the Ethiopia political orthodoxy is there was no such kind of citizenship in Ethiopia all throughout. I mean, even those ruling, those who we know as ruling class or as the dominant elite, they were not even themselves citizens as such, in the modern sense of understanding. But all of a sudden this time, the issue or the concept of citizenship has become very important in Ethiopia. My question is, why is that so? The concept has been unknown to Ethiopian political history, whatever form it may be, and the reason, so the reason why it became important is, by centering one concept as the central issue of politics, they tried or they attempted to overcome different aspects of political issue. They want to reduce it to a single issue, as we did during socialist time, to the issue of class. Now they are attempting to reduce it to the issue of citizenship. So, so the reason is the issue is therefore so that we support the already existent dominant of the identity as a given mark of their conception of Ethiopian citizenship. So they are attempting to universalize a particularity. In the modern world, citizenship is understood as authorship, as agency. That is, through the Enlightenment time, it is called modern age. Through that time, any rational human being, as long as a member of that political community is considered to be a citizen, because by virtue of the fact that he is entitled or she is entitled to determine the form of government in which he or she lives. So it is a human agency, the human rationality, which has been recognized with it, the sovereignty of the people. When we say sovereignty, it sounds usually just a common word, but it is not. It simply says the people is the determinant. The people is the decisive force, not only in electing governments or not in putting procedures of government, but in instituting, founding the society itself. The very state formation is based on people's will. So the theory of contract theory has become very popular during the Enlightenment time. That means it is not, state formation is not a matter of force will, or it's not a matter of nature. It is a matter of human understanding, human agreement, human contract, which creates a state formation or a state itself. So with that, democracy in nations started understanding themselves as voluntary association, as this has been articulated by this theorist. So citizenship is not just a set of rights or elections, but essentially authorship to the very law that create and govern the nation state so that there will be no contradiction between authority and freedom. Because the people formed the state, if the authority, there is no contradiction between the authority and my free will, because the government is instituted by me. So whenever I obey the authority, I'm obeying my own will. So there is no contradiction between authority and will. So for me, I mean, self-determination at this time is a locus of citizenship. That means people's right to decide the form of government is one of self-determination. That means it is the will of the people that matters. And that's what, you know, as I was sitting there and hearing my colleagues, I thought that 15 minutes is too long. Now it has become very short. Well, on this issue, I mean, because I mean, more and more, particularly since globalism has been engulfing, I mean, the whole world, the issue of this diversity, pluralism has become more and more important because this is now in political philosophy a very heated discussion on this issue. So there are three different schools, particularly liberalism, communitarianism, and communitarian pluralism. These are, I mean, living philosophers, living politicians, political theorists who are engaging with this issue. I wanted to present, in fact, you know, a small part of this theoretical debate, but I'm running out of time, so I have to speak again. So, in any case, I mean, Abisha attempt, I mean, to diffuse the issue of citizenship, the issue of the Oromo issue or pluralism to citizenship is just indifference to difference. Indifference to difference is not, however, so innocent. It is, so just indifference to difference is not an innocent standpoint. It is rather an active cover-up in diffusing stripes of the dominated identity. It is ideological maneuver in maintaining the already established hierarchy of identities by reducing all other issues to individual liberty. So this is why they continue to portray that individual after their own image, namely, as speaking Amharic, dancing Iskista, adhering to Coptic Church, adoring Menelik II, promoting the legendary tale of Sheba and Jewish descent of the Ethiopian dynasty. That is a very image of individual identity in Ethiopia. So it is just to promote this image why they became indifferent to difference. Thank you for your attention.